I'm very interested as how we're going to, as architects, really engage in a really meaningful way in terms of the challenges that are facing our community. We're going to be faced with some enormous challenges. The ageing population, I think the Productivity Commission news is alarming. It's been there for some time. People should be aware of it. I mean, how are we going to provide the housing and the health care for an ageing population, which is going to be a significant part of the population with a diminished tax base. Look at the figures in terms of the size of Melbourne is by 2030 looking to be 6 or 7 million. Recent ABS figures just released. Our increasingly diverse population, very different what it was 15, 20 years ago, with our not only just our ethnic diversity, it's our demographic diversity in terms of household configurations. Single households are the fastest growing household in Australia. What that means to housing, we're starting to see evidence that the house and land package on the fringe is no longer appealing to many people. There'll still be a lot of housing of that nature being built, but increasingly there's a need to provide alternative means of housing to satisfy the sort of the diversity. Or developers that are in tune with those changes, which I just talked about, are increasingly focused on providing a range of housing and are not just sticking to the same old. So they're the ones that will be adaptable and will be ready to meet the changes, will be successful. Those who just do the same old will perhaps be less successful than perhaps it has been in the past, because it's been a very simple process. These days it's a much more difficult process, and diversity, getting the housing right is much more of a challenge. From an investor's point of view, if an investor's looking at a development, he or she's got to look at through those type of eyes. Who's out there that's going to be giving them a bigger market? And that's a much broader, diverse type of a market than we've seen in our society, in Australia's history. It is very much a diverse population now. So I think in terms of where investors look, we'll have to look at our society, and that's having a number of attributes in the apartments, where there's a flexibility in terms of apartments, spatially, and also what else the apartment offers to provide perhaps an opportunity that you can't find in your apartment because of the size constraints built, because of the commercial constraints of construction, that you would have augment, or for example, a playground or a playroom, or a space where you can have a party, or you can have your friends and family around. Well, we did a development some time ago, and there's 400 apartments, and we provided some. I think this is about 6 years old now, so it's sort of borne out, I think, in terms of what can emerge in terms of community of buildings on a vertical scale. This is a city building, and it's got some very well used, heavily booked communal facilities. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 book reading clubs within the building. There's dining clubs within the building. There's a whole sort of series of networks and meetings that are had within the building, all using these communal facilities. So it's like a vertical neighbourhood. That people do have the relationships that provide the sense of ownership and neighbourhood and belonging, which really does give buildings the opportunity of being sought after and being sought after retains their values and retains a high level of ownership pride. So it's a self-perpetuating thing. So if you're having a good building, you're having a building which has got the right settings, you have the value retained. And I think that's one of the important things that developers, particularly with a longer-term perspective of brand, and investors, that particularly with having a longer-term look in terms of increased capital value, should be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Australia it's not quite Sweden, where 10 families will very happily share a kitchen. I think it may get there one day, but I think the interesting thing is to look at actually what is more successful about sharing, what is perhaps less successful. I remember looking at one of your buildings, the Canada Hotel redevelopment, in which one of the key locations for sharing was the laundry, and that actually makes so much sense because it's a different kind of development. It's student housing. However, this notion of rethinking a little bit about what our preconceptions are about sharing. So I think there can be much more sharing than there is now. On the other hand, not all sharing works yet, and this idea of private open space is still held on very dear, very much so by the population. I think that will shift, to an extent over time. But I suppose this issue of the kind of surroundings, is an incredibly important issue. We see a lot of people moving out to the fringes, buying a house and land package, which is relatively affordable, but then spending an absolute fortune commuting, all over town for employment and for recreation and so on. So I would say, of course, the key really is to try and get these clusters of activities so you don't have to go too far, and that is very challenging because the housing usually comes first and then the services follow, and that's a model that is, I think, effectively a flawed model. And there are different, I think, ways in which you can start to think about it in alternative ways. So a notion perhaps that a house might not just be a house, but it might be your office, and it might not just be for your immediate family, but you might be able to rent a portion of your house, or even sell a portion of your house if need be, or your circumstances change. So thinking about housing, because there is so much of it, particularly in the middle and outer suburbs, in ways that are going to acknowledge all these changes, function in much more flexible ways to accommodate these things, because the services take often very long to get there.
I live in Richmond, and we've got a great deal of diversity of housing just in our little street, which is a tiny little street in Richmond. And we have our neighbouring buildings are 3 two-storey, 6-pack, 60s built flats. The leasing agents, so there's leasing boards on them all the time now. And talking to the agents, which I like to do from time to time, just to see what's going on and who's doing what, they're saying that they've never felt, the property manager agents are saying that they've never been so busy at painting and carpeting these older style apartments. They're no longer really sought after. People are making the choice whether they're renting to go somewhere else, which is got a great deal more amenity or comfort or interior style and quality. So it's people need to be mindful that quality apartments are what people live in, and they either live them to purchase or rent. And what we're seeing is some of the lower quality stock not being hard to move. The same anecdotal evidence is that some of the smaller, very, very small apartments are having resistance in terms of rental.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to extend that, there is a situation, I suppose, in Melbourne with higher density living that has resulted, for a number of reasons, in I think, substandard new apartments of impossible size, up to 32 square meters, and blind bedrooms. It's very, and you can understand how the market gets to that point, but I suppose it is interesting to understand that as we shift to a more intense and dense and city, and apartments become much more the norm. We have much greater and much more diverse households living in them. So having apartments that are adequately sized, that are providing really great amenity is so crucial. So that's why it's really good to see finally, for example, the inclusion of 3-bedroom apartments, even though that seems like such a small detail. The ability to be able to have families living in what used to be a very homogenous type of environment of maybe singles or couples is, I think, a great idea.